The Quarry, hands-on preview.
Oh my god! Oh, what the f—
The Quarry is a supernatural successor to Supermassive Games' original title, Until Dawn. Let's check it out. This preview is brought to you by absolutely nobody. If you like the video, give it a subscribe. I love these guys. They just like to really throw a bunch of people into a horrible situation and then let us play it out. The game's out on June 10th of all the systems aside from the Switch, which I actually want to say right now I think is a missed opportunity for a game like this. Even with lower resolution graphics, I actually think the idea of a game like this being on the Switch would be awesome, maybe in the future though. The preview was about 1 hour, and the B-roll you see here is Supermassive, wanting to restrict any game spoilers, and I want to put it out there, this is not a situation like some other games where B-roll is required, and that means something nefarious is going on. Even in the small amount I played, there were some major story spoiler moments, so I'm actually glad they did this. Now, since Until Dawn, so many titles have tried to hit this. The anthology series from Supermassive themselves never really got off the ground. Sometimes they're good, sometimes not so much. However, the Quarry is probably one of the more promising titles in the genre when it just comes to what they're trying to do. It features a couple stars that you probably actually recognize, as well as a setup that you expect and the deaths that you hope for in a horror game. If you like these videos, hit subscribe. We're doing more previews this year, and I hope you guys enjoy this kind of content. One thing to remember is this game is not a part of the Dark Pictures anthology at all. It's a separate story about camp counselors being set upon by all kinds of horrors out in the woods. It is a spiritual successor to Until Dawn, so a lot of the gameplay elements here are at least somewhat the same or blown up into a larger proportion. While I was playing this, you get to experience the lives of these 9 playable characters and a huge branching storyline. It has the ability for the characters to also live and die, something we have seen in those others and I got to see in my preview time here. Changing the ending also as you work through it. Supposedly, yes, I want to hit this right away. They have stated in their wiki that they expect to see 186 total endings with 1,000 pages of overall script. Realize that I can only assume this is taking into account small changes across larger ramifications of your choices, and we won't see 186 absolutely large, discrete differences at the ending. But it is something to be aware of. Now, this game has a unique feature, I think, which unlocks after your first playthrough called Death Rewind, which does exactly what it sounds like, letting you adjust the story as you play and rewinding a death that occurs. These kinds of games, if directed right, I think can be phenomenal. As I played through this, one of the things that you do start to notice right away is it unlocks various activities for the characters that are a little bit more quickly introduced than we did see in Until Dawn, including shooting and stuff like that. There's also a movie mode at the end of this. Now, this is totally badass. This will let you set the characters' traits and attitudes, and the entire story just plays out as a movie. I love that idea. To me, that's strangely going to be one of the more interesting aspects of this game, even after beating it, if the story is good. They also have a co-op mode and a multiplayer mode. This lets every single person be one of the characters in the game. That's the kind of interaction that I think we saw a bit in the Dark Pictures anthology, but here it's blown up to a far larger scale due to the just larger cast. You have that ability to go out to make those decisions. In this preview, I got to do some truth or dare with some characters and decide who does what and when and where, and see that angst that comes up with teens who just can't decide which hormone is going to take over their body at any particular time. And as you're playing this, you are instantly aware this is a spiritual successor to Until Dawn. You can feel it in everything that they do, even more so than their other titles. You jump out, you start to learn different things, you start to interact with those characters, and as you interact with those characters, every decision you make adjusts their attitude towards or against you, or towards or against others. And I actually found that there were more interactions in just this small snippet of time that I played, where the interactions that you did didn't only affect you, but they affected the group more than we have seen in prior titles. That is awesome, because there is that indirect interactions that you will have with people by saying something, let's say, mean to another character, and that person might get mad at you, or you say something nice to a character and somebody else might get jealous on the side, as well as the character that you said that to might have their own reaction. And that kind of stuff actually works really well here. While they've stated the Quarry is going to be anywhere from 10 to 11 hours, some character deaths that can occur can drop that a little bit depending on how that works out. That's something we've seen in prior titles. I did have a character death and then not a character death by taking a different interaction here. When it comes to the chemistry of the characters, that's where the Quarry will probably live and die. It's something that we saw with Until Dawn. There were a couple times where the scripting wasn't the best, but I think with the Quarry, that's what we're hoping for. And that's where we're going to get to some of the caveats for me when I played this preview. The first was, while the game is a little bit out and they do have some polish going on, I did notice that it just doesn't look that detailed or really excellent compared to Until Dawn. Until Dawn being a game that is many years old, I was a bit surprised by this, especially in particular cutscenes, and you have another character, well, I don't want to spoil something, but you have some characters that are more detailed than others, and it can look a little different, especially when you get a group and you start to see their interactivities. Also, I did notice that there were a lot of moments where the characters were talking where you know that some of them were in mocap, but you feel that maybe not everybody was, because the way the characters' eyes are looking, they don't necessarily look like they're looking at each other. Small things that can be fixed. I'm actually hoping that that gets polished up as we jump into this. One aside to this, which may actually describe some of the reasons for a couple of these caveats, is there was a lot more interactivity between the characters and jumping between character groups that were together or separate. So you might have a group of 2 over here, 3 over here, 2 more over there. That larger cast allowed for the game to jump back and forth in those spots that I got to play. And I did enjoy that, but it does give it a slightly clippy feeling to it, almost like bits of an MTV style filmed movie versus an actual cinematic one you might go see at the theater. I'm going to be interested to see if that's tightened up a little bit. I did like that ability to jump between them. You would do a small action, it would sort of keep you interested in that moment, and then it would fade away to another group of people. And those interactions that you had and those actions that you take, other characters could hear in the various different other places they were in, which was actually very cool. And to see all that come together is going to be awesome. Because of how the game started out and where it started out, for me, you are basically right in the middle of the story. They had a nice little video there that explained how it all came to be, how it all started up, and then it jumps into probably a couple hours into the game and sort of unlocks some of the gameplay that you have. You have various different ways to track the different characters, their attributes, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and then the interactions that you have. You not only have interactions where you basically see a character's face like we've seen in other games and you have a right or left choice like tease or don't tease, that kind of stuff. You also have some quick time events, as well as, like I said earlier, you do have at least one weapon in the game that pops up and you actually get to see that and get to use it. And I was surprised the control there actually wasn't so bad moving around. That is to say, it wasn't bad there. It was actually a little bit janky moving around the locations. There are a couple times where you jump into a character who is walking in the forest or walking around a location to try to find some items. And the movement there and the camera cuts, there were a couple times, and this is something that we saw in the Dark Pictures anthology, where the camera cut would move and you would have to basically adjust the joystick, the gamepad direction, to keep them moving the way you wanted, because if you didn't, it could become confusing and you could walk back to where that camera changes location, and now up is down, down is up, left is right, and right is left. That kind of thing is a little bit janky. It's something that we see in a lot of these kind of games. I hope they either clear that up or maybe make a little bit of a smoother transitions between those different things that occur. But despite all that, one of the things we were asked to not talk about, or one of the elements we were asked to not discuss too much or in too in-depth, were the antagonist in the game, or antagonists. I will say that I wasn't expecting what I saw in one part. There was one part where I was like, okay, I sort of know what this probably is going to be. And then there was another situation that happened in the game that actually has a fairly high creep vibe to it. And the reason why is because it is not what I expected. What was occurring isn't necessarily different than a lot of other horror tropes, but the situation was slightly askew. And I don't want to give much more detail about that, but if the game has those kind of issues, that kind of delivery of unique sort of unsettling bits is going to be awesome, because while they do have a jump scare or two, they've stated that they want to keep it more subtle, keep the tension there, sort of about building it up until a very particular point. There was one situation where, like I said, it was askew. It was a little peculiar, and it made me think, man, if there were more of these within the game, I could really enjoy it. And another thing I feel like I'm going to enjoy in this game is the music. There's a streamer mode that allows you to basically turn those off so you don't have to worry about any copyrights if you're streaming the game, or you can play with all of the music tracks going. The mixture of basically commercial tracks as well as stuff written for the game is really good. I liked some of those, and it definitely had a Life is Strange kind of vibe to it, which is something that I was very much hoping for. It's something that I felt they actually nailed in Until Dawn, and we've seen other companies go about, whether it be Life is Strange or Tell Me Why, where we see these things sort of work their way into the game and elevate the game. Music to me matters so much, and music in a horror game can matter even more. They do play it out as something that's a little bit, here's a touching moment between these two characters, let's play this, Coldplay song. It's not Coldplay, but that kind of stuff to me actually works. It does elevate, and I found myself actually really liking the tracks that they've chosen. We'll see if the polish has stepped up for the cinematics of the switching between those two bits and those two elements. But overall, that's one place where I was actually quite impressed and did like the choices that they put into the game. So when it comes to previews, these are really hard to do because you don't want to talk too much about what you saw, and especially with this, you really can't talk about the big bads or anything like that. But what we do have with the Quarry is a game that does feel, at least from what I'm playing, as a supermassive successor to their original Until Dawn title. And if they can nail that, I'm going to be really, really happy. They do have some work cut out for them in a couple places that I definitely noticed some issues, but they have the cast. They have at least one or two of the peculiar moments that I think will actually make it quite interesting for people to play. And they have a great deal of modes, and I think that that is awesome. The movie mode, the co-op mode, and the multiplayer mode, those are things that can cause people to really sort of come together in these kind of games and experience them multiple times in different ways. And that's something these guys have always wanted. So anyway, I hope you guys like this video. I'm sorry if the video isn't really necessarily the best that you guys are seeing, but we can't show much. It's pretty much just the B-roll. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys like videos like this. If you do, give it a thumbs up. Check out the Reddit, the Twitter, the Patreon, all that kind of stuff. Peace out and have an awesome week.